Hello and welcome to another episode of the VCDX podcast, a short bi-weekly podcast focused on the VCDX certification with news, updates, advice and special guests. My name is Simon Long, VCDX number 105, and in this episode I'll be chatting to my special guest about the VCDX Prep Slack team, finding out what it is and how you can use it to help yourself or others prepare for their VCDX. Here's a taste of what's coming up.
So I've seen people that have come into the Slack group and are very active in it. They utilize the people, they ask questions, they try and set up mocks, they try and do a lot of stuff, and they'll gain a lot of really good stuff out of that, and predominantly they'll pass.
And I think if they're at that point where they're asking to see what a VCDX design looks like, they're probably maybe not ready to do their VCDX.
I probably wouldn't be where I am in my career without the community and the help around that. And it really is what you put in is what you get out.
Yeah. So just a brief news and updates section in today's episode. There is a VCDX workshop at the Indianapolis VMUG, which is held on Tuesday the 16th of July. So if you're in the Indianapolis area and you would be interested in attending the VCDX workshop, make sure you register. I'll put the registration link in the show notes, and we'll hope to see you there. You're listening to the VCDX podcast. On to our guest interview. Who is this episode's special guest? Give me your name and your number.
So my name is Greg Robertson, and I am VCDX number 205.
Okay, welcome, Greg. Thanks for joining me on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Which VCDX certification tracks do you have, and when did you pass?
So I have the VCDX DCV, so obviously data center virtualization.
Mm-hmm.
I passed that in 2015, which was my second attempt. And then I attempted the CMA, and unfortunately failed it, and then decided not to pursue that.
Okay, cool. So what's your current role, and what do you do in your day job?
I actually kind of have two roles. So I'm a cloud, so I'm a cloud solution lead. So that's anything to do with evangelizing cloud within Dell EMC Consulting. So yeah, that's where I work. And it's a lot of evangelizing, a lot of cloud. So I do a lot of AWS stuff. Obviously, I have a VMware background, and then I also do enterprise architect work. So that's doing chief architect work on a lot of our big customers' projects. So yeah, I kind of bounce between those two.
Okay, and do you have a favorite between the two?
I don't really know. I try and find a nice balance between the two. So I do like quite, trying to pass on information. I think, that's come from being part of like the VMware communities and different things like that. So I like to try and evangelize and share knowledge. So I quite enjoy that, and I quite enjoy trying to learn the new things and what's happening new. But then it's also, it's nice to be challenged on big projects, and trying to see, can I now apply a lot of that knowledge in there? Can I make sure that if something's not going right, can I fix it? Sometimes it's nice, especially for the delivery ones, to kind of apply some of the stuff I learned during my VCDX preparations in my real world work. Sometimes it's quite nice to do that and maybe directly teach some people some stuff.
Cool. Well, it sounds like you're busy. No wonder I haven't heard from you for a while. So how, if at all, are you involved in the VCDX program today?
It changes quite a bit. So I am a mentor. So I'm a mentor and try and help out people as much as I can. But that kind of goes in peaks and troughs. So yeah, depending on how much work I have, etc. I used to try and mentor people a lot more and do a lot of mock panels and things like that. But I never want to make a promise to somebody and then not be able to apply the time to them, because it's not fair to say to somebody, "Oh, don't worry, I'll review your design," and then it takes me a number of weeks to do it. I know that feeling. I've been on the other side, so I try and mentor however I can. And I do a few things. So I have blogged quite a bit. I said to you, obviously I failed my VCDX first time. Actually, funny enough, you were the moderator on that. And yeah, you know what I mean. It's not. It was. I was quite open about failing that, and that was something that even then I was trying. I was quite public about me going for it. I was public about me failing it because a lot of people weren't very public about failing. I thought that was really important because I think more people fail it than people realize.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to put people off, but I think no, and I can understand why people aren't public about it. But I decided I was going to try and make it quite public, and then off of that, once I passed, I tried to put out a lot of stuff I had learned within the public domain to try and explain to people, well, this is what I did. This is how it worked for me. Obviously, everyone's different, but this is what I did. And then I ran a VCDX. Well, actually had a VCDX Google Plus group, and that kind of transitioned into a VCDX Slack group that, I kind of run now and try and make sure. And then I do a little bit of kind of a Sunday before defenses. I try and invite people into Dell EMC and do face-to-face mocks as like their final push before they go into the defenses that week.
That's cool. So tell me a bit more about this VCDX Prep Slack team that you have.
Yeah, so as I said, it kind of grew from a Google Plus group. So it was actually something that initially when I was defending with Renee Van Bedum and Bobby Stamford for my first one that I failed. And we had this Google Plus group that we were helping to, we were all going for it at the same time, and we we're all working together, asking each other questions, allowing each other to present, give feedback. And I really gained a lot out of that. And then obviously Renee went and passed. Obviously now he's a quadruple VCDX.
Yeah.
But off of a lot of that, I thought, well, this group's good, and I invited some new people that were going as part of panels, and that kind of snowballed off that Google Plus group, and it was quite popular. But it was hard to keep track of information that had been put in there before, and it kind of goes. Sometimes people write really important stuff, and then sometimes people are just generally chatting to each other. So the Slack team was quite beneficial because you could do different channels and you could explain different things. You could have mock channel, you could have private stuff for specific people going for a specific defense week. And it really helped for that. And you could pin certain things to try and do it. And also the ease of, because everyone's on Slack, the ease of, you can put out a question. We have so many people on there that have used it and are, have thankfully passed and now, give back to that. I find it quite beneficial. I think until very recently, we hadn't gone through a single defense phase where we hadn't got at least one person from Slack who had passed.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was really good for that. And quite a few people found it beneficial, which is nice.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really good. I mean, I certainly, when I joined not so long back, it's a really, really growing community. There's a lot of people in there. And as you say, there's not just people going for it. There's people who have gone through it, mentoring people, lots of good advice from a lot of different people. So why do you think people should use it? What can they get from it?
Yeah, I think it's a funny one. Yeah, I think it's with a lot of these things. So I think it really is what you make of it. So anything with all these kinds of community things is unfortunately some people, and it comes into the mentoring thing as well. It's some people will ask you, they'll ask for you to be a mentor, or they want to join the Slack group, and then they've got to put in the effort to get the rewards out of it. So I've seen people that have come into the Slack group and are very active in it. They utilize the people, they ask questions, they try and set up mocks, they try and do a lot of stuff, and they'll gain a lot of really good stuff out of that. And predominantly they'll pass, and they'll do really great out of that. Whereas sometimes people will come in and they'll expect people to be giving them information, and that's not helping anybody as well. And obviously, a lot of the people who have passed were all under NDAs. We have Carl Childs, who's obviously the head of VCDX, in there as well. Carl doesn't really talk, but it shows you that we don't talk NDA stuff. We're that permissible towards the NDAs that we're quite happy to invite him, because people can also ask him questions directly, which has been proven beneficial to people. But yeah, because of that, there's a lot of, yeah, it really depends on what people want to get out of it. And yeah, we've seen some good benefits. We've seen some good, obviously a lot of people passing, a lot of people coming back and using it for multiple different defenses. So there's quite a few people in there that have used it for their second, third, or even fourth VCDXs.
Yeah.
And that's good. And it's interesting. A lot of people, I know I get it out of it as well, is it's amazing helping people with mocks. You're continually learning. I think, I'm sure, well, I know it's for me and I'm sure it's for others, that once you pass the VCDX, you actually realize how little you know. And that's nice in a way. It's just nice to come in there and people have different perspectives. People say, well, actually I'm doing it this way. You might not have thought that way.
Yeah.
And that's really nice. I like that whole community thing of it. I know different, some people say, they don't really agree with the study group mentality. They did it by themselves and they passed, and that's fine. I can understand that perspective. But it's not anyone holding someone's hand to get to a certain level. It's each person working together to better themselves. I always imagine it like someone going to the gym. You probably could get really strong and stuff like that by lifting weights by yourself, but if somebody's standing there helping you push out that last rep, that might actually be that piece that really pushes you to that new level. And I think that's nice. And sometimes you have really tough times, especially if you fail the first time, and it's nice to go in there and hear, oh well, I also failed the first time, but I did this. Or there's a lot of people say, oh, I failed, I've got my feedback. Would someone go through it with me and think, maybe they don't see what the panelists might have seen, and someone can look through that feedback and say, oh, I think I can see what they're looking at. I know, Steve knows this part and he can really help you with your NSX pieces or whatever. And that's beneficial as well, I think.
Yeah. And I think you raised a good point right at the start there, is that it's not an easy button. You can't, you're not going to join a Slack team and just have all the answers to all your questions land on your lap and then all of a sudden you're going to pass the VCDX. You've still got to go on there and ask the questions and help contribute back. And I think, one of the cool things I like is that when I've seen new people join, they come in and they say, look, I'm really considering doing my VCDX probably in 2020. Is anyone else thinking about doing the same thing? And there's some other people pop on. Yeah, that's pretty my time frame. And they almost kind of start getting that little team together to start helping them be accountable for the work that they've got to do to get prepared for their defense in a year's time, for example. So
yeah, we do, and we've had a few people. We have some people that are going for the soon to come defenses or just the past defense levels, and they came to some face to face mocks when they were only still doing like the VCIX pieces. And I came along and said, oh, I'd like to come watch. So Dominic came out of Switzerland. He flew over, came into the mocks. He hadn't really done anything, watched it. And then he passed, I think, a defense or two ago. And that shows you how, it had taken him a whole year from coming and watching us and be part of the Slack to actually get into the level. And he said, it was actually, something I always try and explain to people was he came in and he realized that, the people in there aren't some super duper, out of touch people, but with perseverance and work, you could do it yourself. And I think that's also a really important thing. I always, I never want to be the kind of person that doesn't try and assist people however I can. I'll always try and explain that, we're just, normal people that have obviously put in time and effort. You've got to be dedicated, but it's possible if you put in the time.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you spend a lot of your own personal time like running the Slack channels, assisting in mock defenses and mentoring and things. So like, what made you decide this is something you want to spend your own personal time on?
I don't know. As I said, I mean, obviously you and I have been part of like the whole VMware community and the vExpert stuff for quite a while. And I've always gained a lot of benefit out of that. Always, again, it's one of those things, the more you put in, I always feel the more you get out. And it's nice, I've got a lot of really, really good friends in the community. I think I probably wouldn't be where I am in my career without the community and the help around that. And it really is what you put in is what you get out.
Yeah.
And, it just, presenting at VMugs, then you do that and you get confidence, and then you can talk to customers better, et cetera, et cetera. And it's the same idea with the whole VCDX thing. I wanted to go for it. As I said, I found a few people that were also aiming for it and working together. That was nice. It was good, to be accountable and someone challenge you for different things and supporting you. But then, I promised myself once I passed, I would try and help out with the mentoring to try and say, okay, well, I got a lot of help from a lot of people. I want to try and give that back now. And I have to be honest, as I said before, I learn from people as well. So sometimes it's really great to go in there, and maybe you haven't touched the latest, piece of storage or compute or whatever it is. And someone's talking about that and saying, oh, my design has this. And you're like, oh, that's interesting. I never really, I haven't come across that as yet. Yeah. And it's interesting to hear people's different perspectives and different ways of doing things. And it's nice. It's nice to, when people pass and you're like, oh, it's really great. And you can really see that people have benefited from it. I think it's just really nice to try and, when I can, as I said, it kind of goes in peaks and troughs. Sometimes I can help a lot. Sometimes I have to step back slightly. But it's nice. It's nice to try and, help out people however I can. And it's not always, I think it's the most gratifying thing for me really is the people who have passed and then remain in the Slack channel and help out other people. That's really great. I think that whole loop of people going through it and then staying on and helping more people and, pushing people to go for it and believing in people is nice. Definitely. It's nice to see people kind of going through that transition.
Well, that Slack channel certainly has helped the community for sure. So on behalf of everyone else, thank you for doing that. So for people who aren't part of this Slack team, how can people get access to it?
People can reach out to me. I'm on Twitter for Greg Robertson 5. That's Greg with 2 G's at the end. They can reach out and I'll add you. I normally have a precursor to it, and it's not something I'm trying to be mean on or anything like that. But I predominantly say, are you somebody who's realistically going for the VCDX?
Yeah.
And I say that only because, again, I don't want to. First, we've spoken about it already in this. I don't want someone to come in and go, "Great, I'm about to do my VCP and I want to be a VCDX." And there's nothing wrong with that, but they might not get the benefit of it. They might not, really see what's going on, and they might see all this information and think, you know what, this is too high level for me. Or they might ask a question, but they're so early on in their journey that unfortunately people might not be able to help them much. So I normally say, if you're realistically going for it, also because I want people who have to, kind of are saying, all right, I'm really thinking about it. And there's no problem. As you said, there's people that go in there and saying, I'm going to do it within the next year. And that's perfectly fine. I understand it. It does take time. It does take a lot of, different things to get in line and whatever else. And it does cost if you have to pay for it yourself. So I understand that. But normally I say, if you're realistically going for it, reach out to me. I'll invite you to it. But again, the channel is what you make of it. No one's going to share your design with you. Unfortunately, I've had once or twice with more the Google Plus group where someone sent me some messages saying, can I see your design, just to see what a VCDX design is like? And maybe they're saying that in a way of they're not really sure, but obviously, but most people obviously have done it for customers, so they couldn't do that anyways. But also, that's not helping anybody if you pass off a design. And also, unfortunately, I've had it where when I was going for my first one, I had somebody reach out to me saying, oh, if you're interested, I've got these 3 people's designs that they submitted for VCDX. And that, whilst I was working on it, that just made me feel so sick to think of that. And then I also had somebody reach out to me and ask a question very specifically about my design when I don't know how they would have known that. And that's devastating when you've put in a lot of time. So that, again, people, I'm not saying no one can join. I'm not saying people that join or anything like that, but you've got to be careful. It's obviously people's hard work and customer information. So it's always that balancing act.
Definitely. And I think if they're at that point where they're asking to see what a VCDX design looks like, they're probably maybe not ready to do their VCDX.
Yeah, and then we'll normally reach out and say, someone will say, "Oh, I don't really know what a design looks like." I know I put out a blog posting just of, this was my table of contents. So here's the headlines I did. Derek Seaman did one as well. So he also put out and said, "Look, this is my table of contents. This is what theirs included." So we don't have to follow that format, but there's a lot of stuff. We'll normally say to someone if they're just about to start a design, okay, well, do your conceptual piece, and then send it out for review, get some feedback. Okay, now you've done your conceptual. Okay, now move on to logical, and do that. So we try and help people even through it, rather than someone gets to the absolute end, has 3 days before they're submitting, sends out their design, and unfortunately we have feedback that might be quite impactful on their design. So we normally try and help people fairly early on as well, where possible. And some of the guys on that Slack channel are amazing. I don't know where they find the time. There's a lot of guys on there who, they get up at like 3 a.m. to do mocks with people halfway across the world. There's some guys on there that are amazing for what they do. That's why I run the channel. I don't think I could take anywhere near all the credit for it. There's a lot of guys in there that do a lot more. I'm just a medium for a lot of people to talk to each other.
Definitely. But, as you say, in the past, you've been the one doing those mocks offenses as well. And it's just at the moment, your day job is busy and it's taking your time. And, and there'll be times in the future where maybe you're not so busy and then you'll go back into helping out again.
Yeah, hopefully.
Great. Well, what I'll also do is I'll grab those links to those blog posts from you and Dave, and I'll stick them in the show notes as well. So let's finish out with some closing questions. So what was the most enjoyable part of the VCDX certification process for you, and what was the least enjoyable part?
Probably the least enjoyable part was failing in the first time, and subsequent CMA design. The first failure was probably the worst one. Because, I think, you and I had been working on a customer. So I think you were my customer at that point. And I'd been working the day before the defense, did the defense, and then went back to work the day after. And I normally tell people, don't do that. Try and take time off before, try and clear your head and stuff like that. And I think I came into there. I made quite a hash of that first defense because of nerves and a whole bunch of other things. And also, to be honest, I wasn't as prepared as I should have been. But that was probably the least enjoyable part to do that. And I was quite down for a while, but I did take a bit of a breather. I knew what I needed to do, and I said, okay, I'm going to give myself. I think I defended almost 18 months after that first failure, because I just thought, I need to do a lot of stuff. I needed to learn a lot of things. I needed a little bit more project experience. So it was probably the least enjoyable part.
I think that's a bit of kudos to you as well, that the fact that you didn't just run straight back into the fire, and going for the next available defense. It was, you kind of took a step back and go, actually, I'm maybe not as ready as I thought I was. This is going to take a long time. So rather than going to the next one, we'll just wait until I'm ready and then we'll go again. So I think that's a really good thing.
Yeah, I'd done it, and it was, again, as I said, I made it. It was really tough to make it public that I'd failed, but I also put it out there, and I think I'll send you a link on it as well. You can stick in the show notes if you want to. Yeah. It was my whole VCDX prep round 2, and it was really me saying, okay, well, I failed. This is where I think I was lacking an interest in me. I think obviously some of my stuff was around VMware things, but I think a lot of it was supporting technologies. It was supporting things around storage and networking and VCDR and things like that. And sometimes people don't realize, they think, VCDX, you have to be a VMware specialist. And you do have to understand VMware. There's no doubt about that. But it's the whole, it's all the interdependencies. You've got to imagine you're the chief architect for the project. And even though you're the specialist on VMware, you have to understand what everyone's doing and holistically how that's impacting you. That was, I put that out and I said, look, this is what I'm going for. But that was probably the least enjoyable part. Most enjoyable part, obviously, I could say the path, and that's a kind of obvious one. But I think the most enjoyable part of it, and why I tell people, I ask when people come up to me and say, I want to do the VCDX. I said to them, why do they want to do the VX? What's their reasons? Because I think for me, the most enjoyable part and the most beneficial part was actually the journey of it.
Yeah.
I know it sounds like cliche on it, but it really was. A lot of the stuff I learned along the way, a lot of the stuff I learned from the people along the way, and pieces like that. I think that was the real part that I enjoyed the most. It was challenging at points, but it was really eye-opening to see new things. And I said before that you pass and you realize how little you know, but that's kind of beneficial in a way as well, because you look and you think, wow, there's so much things you didn't realize you knew. You could talk to different things, and as I said, when people ask me, say, "Oh, I want to do a VCDX," I say, "Why?" And they might go, "Oh, well, I want this new job, or I want more money, or I want whatever." And I said, you might get a new job out of it, you might get more money out of it, but predominantly the stuff that might get you that new job, or might get you that promotion, or might get you these different things, was actually the stuff you learned along the way. You'll get to the point of passing it, and it's really great. But it's the stuff you learned along the way, and the amount of stuff. I'm doing a lot of things around AWS and Google Cloud, and linking that stuff into VMware. And so much of the frameworks and the different things that I learned along the way for preparing for the VCDX and passing it is actually what I use every day now, applicable to those. So even though the VCDX is very centered on VMware stuff, a lot of the structures, a lot of design methodologies, what you do, how you think about stuff. A lot of the whiteboarding stuff I do is, funny enough, I come in, I was doing a executive briefing yesterday for the customer, and they're coming in and they're talking about what they wanted. And I broke up the board exactly how I would have done in a design scenario.
Nice.
I said, okay, what are you looking for? Did the board, these are your requirements. Okay, this is you've mentioned that. Well, that's this. And, you come across and here's this board, and sometimes people don't see what they, no one's ever put it visually in front of them, and that kind of comes across really well and good for customers. But a lot of the stuff you learn along the process, you can actually use in your day-to-day life. I think that's been the most enjoyable part, because I think that kind of skill set and the confidence you get out of it, to be able to stand in front of a C-level and take in, what they're saying and unpick, they might give you some fluffy thing, and you know how to speak to them and get information out of them, but also keep the tech guys happy. That's the stuff I think's been the most beneficial, and thereby the most enjoyable out of it, really.
Yeah, no, I think it'd be really cool if you could, like, when you said to yourself, like, okay, I think I know enough now. I know everything I need to know to be a VCDX. Take a snapshot at that point, and then take another snapshot when you've passed, and you kind of look at the delta between what you thought you knew and what you know now, and you realize, you kind of think to yourself, I really didn't know that much when I thought I knew everything. It's
there's always that diagram of when you think you know everything, when you actually know everything, and how much you still need to know. That's the thing, is it's crazy how many things, and it is quite daunting, because then you realize there's so many new things to do, so many new stuff, and that's also exciting in a way to look and go, well, actually along this process I learned about CI/CD pipelines, and actually that's quite interesting to me. Let me learn more about that. And then a lot of people have obviously passed their VCDXs and then decided, that was really great, I really enjoyed that, but actually one portion of it was actually what I really found interesting. Maybe I'm going to try and delve into that a lot more. So that's also where a lot of people will grow from there.
Definitely. So knowing what you know now, if you could go back in time, back to when you were preparing for VCDX, what 3 pieces of advice would you give yourself?
I think the first one I kind of said really earlier is, I think for the first one, I should have taken a little bit. I'm not saying I should have delayed the defense, but I think I should have taken off time before the defense. So for my second one, I took the week off before my defense. And that was really helpful, because that was really helpful that I felt I could really focus on the design. It was sitting in there. I was just going over the different stuff. I was standing up and presenting my design scenario and making it up on the fly and drawing on the whiteboard. I felt like I was almost back on the project. So my design was a real world customer, but I felt like I was almost back on the project. And that, for me, I felt was highly beneficial, to actually almost detach from what I was doing, at that present time on a customer, but actually feel like I was going back into the project again. So when I went into the defense, I almost felt like I was just telling somebody about the project. So, I came in and I felt like, I always tell people, you're going in there, and for me, it was of explaining to the panelists as if there's somebody who's coming on the project. So saying, you've been on the project for however long, and these are new people, that are your colleagues, and they're coming on the project now. Mm-hmm. And what would you tell them about the project? You know the nuances, the strange little decisions that were made and why, and explaining it that way rather than feeling it's three people there trying to grill you. That confidence and things like that also came across really well. So that's probably the first one I would say was of advice. Is, I know a lot of people that have really, really burnt themselves out, and I was burnt out after that first one. I actually, I don't know how. Actually, at that point, I felt I was serious. So I was thinking, maybe I'm just going to give up on virtualization totally and do a totally different job. So I'm so burnt out and so disappointed. You spend so much time and you sacrifice time with like your family and stuff like that. My first daughter was probably 9 months old when I did that first defense. So there's a lot of things where you make sacrifices, and it's tough to then, you feel bad on your family if it's not successful. So I think that was probably my first piece of advice. Second piece of advice, again, it's actually something I've kind of touched on, is I would reach out to people earlier on in the process of designs. So when you're going and you're doing your conceptual design, you've done all of this, is reach out to somebody and say, can you look at this and what do you think? And give them that information, because for my second one, I went back and I retrofitted a few things. So I put in a lot of design decision tables after some discussions with Renee, who was my mentor for my second one, and a lot of things like that, where I went in, I spent a lot of time going in there, writing down what my reasons were and things like that. But if I wouldn't have had to have done that, if I had actually put in the structures very early on. And that's why I said to people, do your conceptual, get that really nice, get people to sign that off. When you're happy with that, then go into logical, get someone to look at that, and then go into physical. And I'm not promising you're not going to have to go back and change a couple of things. Especially if you do like a requirements traceability matrix. It's amazing how you'll get to the end and you realize you had, a key requirement, but you actually haven't mentioned it at all in your physical. And that's also a learning thing. I think doing that kind of stuff, it teaches you new things, and you realize the reasons you do stuff. And are you doing technology for technology's sake?
That's a good point, though, because we're all techie people, right? We all want to get down to the nuts and bolts and the cool stuff. It's a bit like when you're learning to drive, no one wants to do the theory bit first. You just want to get in the car and get going, right? But sometimes you have to do the prep work, and doing the conceptual design is the prep work for everything that comes after that. So it's a good bit of advice.
It is, and that's the thing. I mean, I've had it before where people have sent me their conceptual designs and have come back and I said to them, you could be much more definitive on this. You're you're not very clear on that, or they've said a requirement, but I could read that 3 different ways. And someone might look at that and go, you know what, you've delivered this design, but what I meant was actually this, and that could impact severely a project. But also, obviously, if you're in a defense and someone says to you, I don't think that's what they meant by that requirement, what would you do? That kind of stuff. So I think that's helpful. And again, that applies so importantly to real world stuff, because being very, very clear with the customer, is this what you mean by this? Is it very clear? And amount of times I've said that, I've said it in front of a real world customer, and two people from the customer have 2 differing opinions of what that is. And that's really helpful, because then if you hadn't been very clear in asking that, they both thought that they were getting what they thought. And then at least one person would have been disappointed. So I think that's probably really important.
Definitely.
And then I think the third piece of advice, I don't know how possible it would have been, but I think for the third one is I think there's nothing wrong with being passionate and wanting stuff, but I think I got too passionate at points. I think I wanted it so badly, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I think I should have channeled that energy more into what I was doing rather than worrying about other stuff. So I was at points I was really keen on doing it and getting defenses and working with stuff like that. And I was so keen to do different things. I was actually I wasn't channeling a lot of that energy, which is good energy, into, okay, well, let me learn new stuff. I was more worried about, when was the next design defenses, or something's changed. I know obviously actually this might be slightly applicable to you, but for second defenses, obviously I had to defend my CMA, whereas a lot of people just submit their design. And these things happen. So I was put out by that, going, oh well, I was so close before that changed. But in all honesty, these things happen. Stuff's always going to change. I'd recommend someone read Who Moved My Cheese. It's really about, unfortunately, things are going to change, especially in IT. But I think I was just at points. I think it was good I had that passion, because sometimes you've got to decide what's more important to you. Is watching a football game more important to you than passing the VCDX? And that's sometimes that thought process is really important, but trying to channel that energy more into, okay, well, don't worry about whatever this is, whatever it is that's the way it is now. Let's start working towards that goal. I'm not perfect at that point. I probably still some things, if someone changes something, I probably still struggle to not get caught up into it. But that's probably my third piece of advice I'd give myself.
I think also from an outside looking in now, some people maybe put too much pressure on themselves and make this thing bigger than it needs to be, to the point where when it comes down to it, there's so much pressure on them, and you kind of get into that state of mind where it's all about just doing this VCDX defense and passing, and you're kind of forgetting about everything else that's going on in life. And I think that kind of ends up putting more pressure on you, and you end up maybe not performing as well as you could because you're not thinking correctly. If you can try and just relax a little bit more about it, almost see it as a hobby, something you enjoy doing, rather than this is something you've got to do, you can't live without it type thing. I think that would probably help a lot of people, because they're a lot more relaxed.
You don't want it to become a task. And that's the thing. For that first one, I was a nervous wreck for my first defense. I put a lot of pressure onto it. I was doing a lot of things. Whereas the second one, I think I almost stopped prepping a couple of days before the defense. And my wife said to me, "Goes, oh, you seem so so less stressed about it." Because also the second time, I focused on time, but I would set out a certain amount of time, but I'd still spend time with my kids and with my wife and doing other things. And I was, sometimes you do have to work until midnight to try and catch up on something, but you've got to try and find that balance. But the second time I was finished a couple of days before, and I said to my wife, I said, what, I feel I'm at a point where I've done what I can. It's always tweaking it, and you're always going, okay, let me just run through the presentation one last time to stay fresh. But you get to a point where you think, I've done what I can. And you can get into your head. And I think that sometimes, again, that's another reason why I did the study group was, it's amazing. If I remember my first mock defense, and it was horrendous. We stopped it early because I was so bad on it. But sometimes with people, that's what you need to get out of your system sometimes. And people go, okay, the first time it's horrendous. It's hard to put yourself out there and for people to be very critical of what you've done. But with more practice, you gain more confidence, you learn from it. And that, again, that's really applicable if you're in front of customers and you have to talk to, the C level of some big company, and they say to you, if this doesn't work, are you ready for both of our names to be on the front page of the paper tomorrow? And that's, that kind of stuff is true, but you've got to be confident, and you've got to understand that stress. And it's about stress management as well sometimes. I'm sure there's a lot of people that have ended up,
Yeah, definitely.
making themselves sick in defenses.
Oh, for sure. And that's not something that we never want to see as a panel as well, because we know if someone's very nervous, they're never going to be able to give their 100%. So definitely. But it's interesting you kind of say about being prepared, and then at some point you just kind of say to yourself, I've done all I can. I'm ready. And it was weird because I had that feeling as well, because when I was preparing for mine, I was over in Barcelona. And my panel was towards the end of the week, and I remember sitting in the evening, going through my design, going through the presentation, and at one point something just said to me in my mind, "That's it. You've done everything you can do now. Just leave it. Just stop going through it now." And I think that was kind of I don't know what in me kind of just did that, but it was at that point I was like, okay, I'm done, I'm ready, and I think that helped me relax a little bit more for the actual defense itself.
Yeah, and you're able to enjoy it really as well. So that if you can get to that point, then as I said, you actually feel like you're explaining to somebody who worked on the project with you. You can go in there, and I think I made one or two jokes during my defense, which I probably wouldn't recommend to everybody. Maybe that's another.
I don't know. It's fine. Like we'd rather have people give a couple of jokes than people would be there so nervous they can't
it could go either way depending on where your panelists are from. But yeah, I think that was the thing. I think near the end, someone said to me, basically, I think it's a normal text of don't say anything. Don't say anything on social media. And I knew all my panelists. I said to him, "Oh, don't worry about that. I don't use social media." And at least one of the panelists laughed. So that kind of stuff. But that was the kind of thing of I did it. And I remember when I left, I think my brother phoned me. He said, "Oh, how did it go?" I said to him, I think it went well. I said, "You know what? If it didn't go well, then I'll have to work out what it is, but I can't imagine it was much." And that sounds cocky, but it wasn't like that. It was just, I felt like I'd put in a lot. And if it was something, then it would be, sometimes it'd be something very minimal, or I hadn't explained something correctly or whatever else. But yeah, you just get to a point where you think, okay, I've done that. And it's tough. I know a few people that have defended before. They've defended once and they've never gone back. And that's something I always felt like I had that 500 kilo gorilla on my back. I had to do it at least once. And then my CMA one I did in my part-time. I decided I would just do it to see if I could. And that was cool. It was cool to actually apply a lot of what I've learned from VCDX onto a new design. And I failed that because I was probably a bit naive, not realizing that the landscape had kind of changed. I mean, my defense, I was reaching near the end of the VCDX cycles, the VCDX or VCDX5. I mean, my design had had VTEX in it and stuff like that. So it was the old stuff like that. But when I came in from a CMA, everything's changed to this whole STDC thing now. So you have to understand NSX, you have to understand, hyperconverged storage or whatever kind of things, and the ecosystem had changed. But it was nice that second time. I'd done it just to see if I could do it, and when I failed it, I was tempted to go again, but to be honest, I didn't see anything additional coming out of it. By that point, I was trying to learn new things, and
definitely, no, exactly. Times change, and you kind of think to yourself, "Oh, you got to think, what am I going to get from this? Is there going to be adding any value?" And people always say to me, "You're going to go for VCDX 3 and 4," and I kind of think to myself, probably not. I'm not going to get too much value from them unless I decide to start focusing more on NSX or something like that. Then maybe it'd be something I could do, but you've got to think to yourself, okay, I've only got so much time in my life that I can do these type of things with everything else going on, so pick and choose your battles wisely. And that's kind of why I've not really gone through anything more. But Greg, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. Thank you very much for your time. I know it's a little bit limited at the moment, but, thanks from everyone else that you've, all the help you've done in the community, for all the people that you've helped pass and going to help pass in the future. And maybe we'll have you on again in the future. Yeah,
thanks for having me on. And thanks for touting the Slack group. I hope it helps some people.
I imagine it will help a lot of people. So thanks again for putting that together. All right.
No problem.
Cheers, Greg. So moving on to this episode's common mistakes section. In this section, we talk about common mistakes that VCDX panelists that we see throughout the design defenses that we're paneling. This week's common mistake has been provided by one of our newer panelists, Paul McSherry, and it's around having a design that has too many customer constraints. Now, we all know that there often are many constraints that customers put on the design, whether it be you have to use this type of hardware, or you have to use something that is already existing, or their limited budget, for example. But what we're finding is if there are too many constraints, it often limits the ability to show design expertise. So if, for example, one of the constraints was to use the existing networking infrastructure that a customer already has, and that networking infrastructure is maybe not designed to a high standard, that may affect your score during the defense, as yes, it's a constraint, but you haven't demonstrated that you can actually design a network that provides the availability or the performance that your design needs. So at this point, we would need to dig deeper during the defense scenario to be able to understand if you are comfortable with the networking, if you can actually design a highly available or a high performing network without the constraints that your customer design put on you. So our recommendation would be, if you do have a design that has a lot of customer constraints that would probably limit our ability to score you, remove some of those constraints. The design itself doesn't have to be 100% real. Some of it can be hypothetical. So make sure you make those changes to enable the panelists to be able to score you better. That's all we have time for on this week's episode of the VCDX podcast. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please be sure to subscribe and share it with others who might find this podcast interesting. Again, thanks to my special guest Greg Robertson, and I'll speak to you all in 2 weeks' time.